back for match number 1 of this particular video, but match number 3 of the league overall. If you want to see the deck tech and the other couple of matches, it will be probably the video before this. I'll try to link it in a card. Alright, so we're on the play, which is nice. This hand is decent. Not the ideal burn hand. The ideal burn hand obviously has a 1-drop creature, especially on the play. But, you know, suspend a Riftbolt, potentially double skewer the critics or hold up Skull Crack, whatnot. Not a terrible hand, potentially. Opponent leads on Codex Shredder, so we're up against some style of looks like Lantern-based deck. Codex Shredder usually only played in those kind of decks. Lantern of Insight, sure enough, shows up, and we do the thing. Boros Charm them, do that. Put our opponent to 1 here. Opponent plays Thopter Foundry. We go ahead and attack. They make a dude. We kill them in response and have Skull Crack backup. Been a while since I've seen any variant of Lantern of Control. It's interesting that they're mixing Lantern with Urza Thopter Sword. So let's take a look at sideboarding and get on to game number 2. So as far as sideboarding, there's a lot of different approaches you can take, because this deck's kind of all over the place. Obviously they have artifacts, obviously they have Urza, they have Thopter Foundry Sword. You could try to bring in Relic to try to fight the combo, but oftentimes they can play around something like Relic. Rest in Peace would be much more interesting in this style of matchup, as far as what you're trying to do. Could bring in Path to Exile for Urza. Once again, don't really know how many creatures our opponent has. Are they running Emery, or are they running, are they just literally running Urza? It's really kind of hard to tell. So for that reason, I decide to board out Rift Bolts and a Lightning Helix. I probably should have boarded out Searing Blaze, but Blaze I left in just in case they had Emery. Any of that kind of nonsense can answer that profitably, but probably should have boarded out those. We boarded in the 3 copies of Vortex and then 2 copies of Wear Tear, just kind of hedging. Overall, this is a reasonable matchup, or at least historically was a reasonable matchup when a Lantern was a deck. But with Urza, Thopter Sword gets a little bit closer. Not really quite sure, where it rates on things. This hand is okay, but not spectacular. Searing Blaze is a very questionable card in this kind of a hand. Do you think this hand's a keep, but Searing Blaze is only reasonable if we run into something like an Emery. Actually, mulligan that hand. Maybe properly so. That hand was kind of iffy. This hand's a little bit more aggressive. That way, if our opponent's on like a Lantern bridge draw, we have a little bit better of a chance of getting under them damage-wise, or like a Witchbane Orb. There's a lot of different things they could have access to if they're a Whir deck. And just randomly mills this whenever they have a chance. They play a Thord. Lava Spike them, we bolt them, hit them for a ton. Once again, we're having a very good start. Opponent just does the thing. We attack. Just go ahead and bolt them here. Put them to 4. Opponent goes to 3, likely casting a Whir. Whir for 2. Probably the combo. If they have Force of Negation here, it's game over. They don't, so we win with a Boros Charm. Like I said, various Whir decks have existed in the past. Lantern of Insight. It's an interesting combo. It's kind of hard to tell how far they go in on like the actual Lantern combo, or are they more of the Thopter Sword. Neither deck has been particularly popular of late, but especially Lantern Control, it just kind of disappeared with the banning of Opal. I could see playing some number of Mox. What is the name? The legendary Mox that only taps when you have a legendary permanent. If you're running Emerys and Urzas and maybe a few others, you could potentially get away with that. It's the one they ran in Keith's combo. Drawing a blank on the name of the card, but it's kind of interesting because the Urza Urza decks were always kind of a close matchup, but I think we were slightly favored Whereas Lantern Burn was one of the few decks that I actively wanted to take into a Urza matchup. The only other deck that remotely had a shot that I would play from time to time was Jund. Everything else I would play against Lantern, and I'm just like, oh, this is a miserable matchup. So, anyways, on to match number 2 in this video, and match number 4 overall in this league. Alright, we're back for our second match in the video, 4th match overall in the league. This hand is a bit of a sketcher. We are on the dross. This hand is very tempting with the 2/1 drops and the bolt. I do think we end up keeping this hand, though whether it's correct or not, I don't know. Our opponent mulligan to 6 shows us Prairie Stream. We draw our second mountain, which isn't terrible. Don't know. Opponent mana leaks. Go ahead and do that. Suspend a Riftbolt. Opponent plays that. Bounces with Turfluffle. Play the Goblin Guide. We lost the Riftbolt to Teferi, which kind of sucked. And then continue to attack here. They foretold a card. Yeah, just hard cast a Riftbolt, bolt their face, put them to 6 basically. Opponent casts Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Starting to get to the point where things are going to slip away. They have Behold the Multiverse. We put them to 1. Opponent does the Jace thing. Look at the top cards. They tuck with Teferi. We have Boros Charm. They have a counterspell for it. Logic Knot, by the way it was cast. It just does an absurd amount of stuff. Plays Teferi, draws a card. We have Skewer the Critics here. Again, it's possible I'm supposed to hold cards in hand, but I think at this point it's just kind of comical. How many resources our opponent has. Instant speed, hard cast, Terminus. Like I said, maybe we're supposed to hold cards in hand, but at this point, it's kind of almost a joke. And then I concede, as our opponent's just going to have way too many resources. Don't know how many counterspells they have in hand, but at this point, we're just, literally there at 1. I'm sure there was a sequencing error in there somewhere. But, that's one of the things, like, blue-white control, old school blue-white control like this can be very demoralizing to play against in a long game, just simply because you're not going to win the game, but you have them at 1 life, and you're like, well, maybe I can resolve a spell, and then it just kind of spirals from there. But maybe a bit of a premature concession. Obviously, they didn't have Jace quite to ultimate yet, but they have 7 cards in hand. They're controlling our draw step, and they have an active Teferi. So, like I said, bit of a sequencing errors there. I should probably have held a couple cards in hand, tried to maybe double or triple spell them in a turn, maybe force them to answer things in a less efficient way. But, sometimes when you get in that kind of cycle, you're just like, I just kind of want to get this over. Anyways, on to sideboarding and game number 2. Alright, we're back for game number 2, with a little bit of sideboarding. Main things, we boarded out some copies of Searing Blaze and Riftbolt. Obviously, Searing Blaze doesn't have a ton of targets in a deck that's mainly winning with Planeswalkers. They might bring in something like Monastery Mentor or have Snapcaster Mages and Shark Typhoon tokens in their deck. But generally speaking, pretty bad card. Riftbolts, as you saw, we lost 1 there to Teferi, to Time Raveler. Also, when you're bringing in something like Vortex, you don't generally want to be free casting your spells. Doesn't hurt as much, taking 5 damage against blue-white control is generally they're going to win, just by boring you to death, lack of a better thing, or just countering everything you do and winning with some arbitrary thing, so it doesn't matter. Taking 5 damage here or there, maybe if they have like some type of Lyra or Baneslayer game plan in the post-board games, which I haven't seen a lot of in any of these decks, or if they're against, some type of Stoneforge Mystic version, though it definitely didn't look like it in the games we played there. We didn't see any Stoneforges, we didn't see any Batter Skulls, we didn't see anything like that. Taking 5 damage generally isn't going to really terribly matter there. We bring in our 3 copies of Relic and our 3 copies of Vortex. Vortex obviously goes just a ticking threat. You only have so many ways to deal with it once it's resolved. They do have Actually, they have quite a few ways potentially: Celestial Purge, Ether Gust, Teferi, etc. So it does pay to tax their resources a little bit with permanent-based stuff, but, at some point they have to answer everything, so, Anyways, we're on the play here. And Relic, obviously not the best, but at the same time, if they have Snapcaster Mages, it's a little bit of value to shut those down, etc. As far as this hand, it's okay. We have 13 points of burn in hand, which is okay. Although I mulligan that? I don't know. I guess I'm looking for a more aggressive start. But that hand was probably keepable. This hand's perfectly fine. 3 lands, Relic, Vortex, a couple burn spells. Obviously not the best hand in the world as far as like pressure, but we're playing a lot of things that give our opponents problems. We play that. There is some argument to potentially playing something like Relic there to play around Spell Snare, but I don't think we're ever going to get in a position where we don't play things. Opponent has Ether Gust, which is kind of annoying, but it's whatever. Didn't need to shock in there, which was kind of dumb. We play Vortex, they have Mana Leak, or we play Eidolon there, they have Mana Leak. We play one of our Vortexes, they just counter everything pretty much. Play Vortex, they have Dovin's Veto. Notably stuck on 3 lands for a little bit there, but kind of hard to pressure terribly much there, as they've answered like a bajillion spells. So now we're playing the kind of waiting game here, but our opponent is so high on life, as I was mentioning about Relic, good at kind of slowing down Snapcaster Mage. Opponent actually stops us from killing their Snapcaster Mage, which is kind of annoying. Go ahead and Skewer, play out Eidolon, they have Spell Snare. This game just isn't going particularly well. That's the thing about blue-white control, is a lot of times the matchup is just... There are very few windows where the matchup's interesting. You either get into this long, kind of grindy, hope everything kind of works out in a flurry kind of thing, or you beat them in a landslide, and then there's very few games where things are kind of interesting in the in-between. Like I said, they had a bajillion cards. They were still relatively low on resources, but they're clocking us with Colonnade, so we really didn't have a choice but to try to go for it there. And then we put them to 3, and our last card's an Eidolon, and then we're dead to Celestial Colonnade. So as you might have seen in one of our more recent burn videos, we absolutely landslided blue-white control. This matchup, you kind of got the opposite end of things. There wasn't any particularly close games. They had a bunch of early answers. They had Ether Gusts and Spell Snares and everything for all of our various different plays there. Maybe I could change up the sequencing with like Eidolons and Vortexes there, but it's really kind of hard to deal with trying to resolve Roiling Vortex or Eidolon. That's why I said maybe I mulligan that initial opening hand was just because I didn't feel it was aggressive enough. A lot of times against blue-white control, you get past turn 4, turn 5, and they're still at a reasonable life total. It's possible that hand with all those burn spells actually would have been better than the permanent-based disruption we ended up having. But at the same time, that Snapcaster Mage that our opponent had would have gotten more value. So it's really kind of hard to say, what hand is better of those two against blue-white control. Ideally, you want to be leaning on Swiftspear or Goblin Guide on turn 1, really putting them under pressure, forcing them to react, and as they react, you can resolve other hate-based threat or other, your other hate threats, your Eidolons, your Vortexes. That's kind of the ideal situation where you force them to react, resolve another threat, force them to react, resolve another threat. It's kind of like historically how you beat blue-white control in a lot of spots is you put pressure on the board, force them to react, resolve another spell or two, force them to react to that, and then, when they have to finally tap low for, a threat or something, or, firing up Colonnade, especially before Force of Negation was printed, you're able to, fire off this flurry of spells during their turn. One of the things this matchup has gotten closer over time is because Burn now plays a lot of sorcery speed stuff. Skewer the critics, you tend to play, less copies of Skullcrack and Lightning Helix as a result. So while you're a little bit more mana efficient during a key turn, maybe, it's during your turn, not their turn. What's one of the downsides of some of the versions of Burn that's been floating around is you often play a lot of sorcery speed stuff against these instant speed decks. Kind of gets a little bit rough sometimes. You're not able to utilize your mana during key turns, but like I said, the matchup I think overall was close, but the games feel massively lopsided. There's that turn 2 to 5 window where the game feels close, but either you're dumpstering them or they're dumpstering you, and they just take forever to get there. Sometimes you could eke out things, when you used to play Exquisite Firecraft and stuff. But Firecraft's obviously significantly worse with Aethergust. Still maybe a card worth exploring if blue-white picks up more steam. But, it is what it is. It's a close matchup. They have cards they can have. A lot of times they have Aethergust and Celestial Purge. Sometimes if they respect Burn specifically, they have timely reinforcements. But their win cons, they vary. Whether they're Stoneblade variant or the non-Stoneblade variant. But interesting matchup, but this one definitely felt lopsided because our opponent just had a lot of early interaction and we died. So, anyways, on to the next match. Back for the third match in this particular video, 5th match overall in the league. We're on the draw, unfortunately. Taking a look at our opening hand, we have a couple of 1-drops here. Searing Blaze, Riftbolt, decent hand overall. Sequencing, usually go Goblin Guide, Swiftspear Riftbolt, or Goblin Guide, Searing Blaze, depending on what our opponent's doing. 2 lands and a fetch land, kind of a nice setup overall. Opponent goes turn 1, Scalding Tarn. Alright. Another Goblin Guide, so that might change our sequencing a little bit. Reveal Snow-Covered Island into Hallowed Fountain. We're drawing too many lands for my tastes. Swing here. Let's draw a boatload of lands. Opt there kind of suggests they might be on a Terminus build. We just do the thing where we attack. When it does basically nothing, we suspend a Riftbolt. They do Hieroglyphic Illumination. Once again, seems like they're looking for a Terminus, and our opponent scoops it up. So from what little we can see, it looks like they're a blue-white control variant, possibly with Terminus in their deck, just the way that they were cycling. Although I do think the Hieroglyphic Illumination opt sequencing was a little bit off. It's possible they drew the opt off of the Hieroglyphic Illumination cycle, so I can't really read too much into that. But especially with Field of Ruin and the fact that we didn't see any red sources kind of leads me to believe that our opponent might have been on blue-white miracles as opposed to more traditional blue-white control. So let's see how I sideboard, although I suspect I'm going to have sideboarded very similarly to how I did against the normal blue-white control list. Alright, we're back for sideboarding. We did board very similarly. A couple of Riftbolts, all the Searing Blazes, bring in the relics, bring in the Roiling Vortexes. Once again, Riftbolt, potentially a dangerous card against Teferi Time Raveler. I'm not sure how many Teferi Time Ravelers the Miracles lists usually play. I know blue-white control has a little bit more room for them. This deck tends to play things like Omen of the Sea and such, so maybe they don't have as much room. But, we don't know for sure that our opponent's on Miracles. They just at least indicated very hard that they were by how they were doing things. Though to be fair, I think our previous opponent was also on Miracles variant, as they did hardcast a Terminus and instant speed to answer a Monastery Swiftspear. This hand's just unacceptable. 5 lands, 2 burn spells, just not good enough. This hand is much more interesting. 3 lands, but a bunch of 2-mana spells, so potentially could get clogged up, but I still think I'm all going to 6 keep this hand. Put back one of the fetch lands, most likely. Oh, I put back the Canyon land. That was interesting. No, I was like, why would I put back the Canyon land? That makes no sense. Okay, we draw Lava Spike, which is not terrible. At least gives us a 1-mana play. Opponent plays Pathways, which is interesting. We just I guess I jam nothing here. Go ahead and jam Boros Charm. Opponent just lets it resolve. We just continue to play the instant speed game. I guess because they could potentially have had timely reinforcements. It's just hecka awkward. Continue to pass here. Opponent does 9 lives. Now that's a piece of work. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage, and put an incarnation counter. If there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, exile it. When 9 lives leaves the battlefield, you lose the game, and also has hexproof. So we have to deal our opponent 9 points of damage. A little bit of a screw up here on my part with Skullcrack. We resolve that, try to resolve that. They have Force of Negation. That was certainly a card. If we could have resolved Roiling Vortex, would certainly have been very interesting in this style of matchup. Eidolon also is another card that could potentially do a bunch of damage. So, let's go ahead and do attacking. Opponent does the thing. They're up to 2 counters. They opt. Once again, I'm still thinking they're on miracles so far. We do the Goblin Guide thing. Opponent goes ahead and Snapcaster Mages and pass their own guy, which is kind of weird. Again, this is kind of what I say about blue-white control. They're just kind of annoying. They hit a Terminus here, get rid of our Goblin Guide. Like, we know we've lost the game, but it's just going to take us a while to get there. So our actually has to present a threat. We're just going to start holding spells in hand because we literally don't want to fetch up our other basic, because then Field of Ruin becomes a completely annoying card. Plays Jace. They start doing things with Jace, that way we can't kill it. Goblin Guide attacking, they show Terminus, which means they float the Terminus, get rid of the Goblin Guide. Once again, all these spells would be great if, See, the trick is if we go Bolt and then Skullcrack and we actually resolve the Skullcrack, then they just die to 2 spells, because 9 lives is a form of damage prevention. Because if you looked when we Skullcracked them earlier, they went from 8 to 5. So, and they took the counter. So, otherwise we have to resolve 5 more spells before our opponent, ultimates this Jace. And this Jace is a relevant threat that we actually have to do something with. So we go for the thing here. Opponent does Blessed Alliance. They take their Jace up. We start the volley. They're up to 6 counters. We play Swiftspear. Archmage's Charm, steal it. We try to deal them. Basically, all these spells have to resolve, and then they have a Dispel. And that's the game. Because our opponent gets to Ultimate Jace the following turn. If you've ever read Jace's, exile all cards from target player's library, and that player shuffles their hand in their library. So all we'd have is a fetch land. Wouldn't do much. And then we die. And I really don't want to give my opponent the additional information of, the cards in my library. So, 9 lives was definitely an unexpected card. Not really anything we can do about it, honestly, because it has hexproof. Just kind of have to hope to get a little bit lucky or resolve Roiling Vortex, because each one of those ticks would be a point of damage, which would cause our opponent to have problems. Not saying that they don't have answers to it, but at the same time, that potentially could swing the game in our favor. So, anyways, on to the third and deciding game against Blue-White Miracles. Back for game number 3. Notably, we didn't bring in the Wear Tears, because once again, 9 lives is an interesting piece of tech, but it is hexproof, so it can't actually target it. We're on the play. We're just kind of hope for a nice aggressive start. Something we've actually been lacking in some of these blue-white games. We have Goblin Guide, Eidolon, Relic. Very good overall, so we're definitely keeping this hand. 2 lands, probably ideal. 3 can be a bit much. You risk floating out a little bit. Some Big Canyon makes things a little bit better. Looks like our opponent mulligan before this game. They play the Scalding Tarn. We attack in, see if they have a path or something. The one downside of Eidolon here is it plays right into Spell Snare, which it looks like they actually don't have. We attack. Not casting any spells before combat. They opt and do not hit Terminus. So we take the opportunity to try to kill them here. And they have Force of Negation to go to 1. And then they basically have to spike Terminus or they're dead. So, you know, sometimes, you know, you talk about needing an aggressive start in these matchups, and then sometimes you basically get the turn 3 kill. You know, turn 1, Goblin Guide, turn 2, Eidolon, turn 3, 3/1 drop spells. You know, they have the Force of Negation, but still take 2 and have to pitch a card, which would they end up pitching? Jace. So, one of the things, one of the weaknesses of blue-white control in particular is the fact that, you know, they don't have a ton of one-mana interaction. They generally have Path. A lot of the reasons a lot of these decks went to 3 colors, whether it was Esper or Jeskai over the years, was simply the fact that blue-white or blue-white X didn't have a ton of early interaction. They had Path Exile and that was it. And then your options are things like Oust or Condemn, which aren't particularly great. Oust obviously being sorcery speed, Condemn being only restrictive to combat. Obviously they have interaction like Ether Gust and Celestial Purge, but our opponent was on a Terminus build, hoping to spike a Terminus there. Took a little bit of damage from the Eidolon. You know, sometimes if they spike those Terminus, that the deck feels awesome. But one thing we didn't see notably out of our opponent was, I know when Spike worked on the deck a while back, he was a big fan of Omen of the Sea, and I don't think Omen of the Sea is a terrible card. Allows you to scry a little bit deeper than things like Opt and Hieroglyphic Illumination. So, interesting that the blue-white control lists that we were running into were the Miracles variant, but you know, nice to get the win, pick up the 4-1 in the league overall. So, thoughts on the list. Deck's fine. As I mentioned in the one deck tech, could probably go down to 2 Roiling Vortexes. The way the meta is starting to shape up. Potentially could go back to Smash over the copies of Wear Tear, although once again I do like having outs to things like Leyline Sanctity. Beyond that, could possibly shave a Path Exile, depending on how this weekend's events shake out. I know a lot of big end streamers or whatnot. I know Reed Duke was playing Jund Shadow, which is a matchup you might want 4 Path Exile in. I know GG was also playing Jund Shadow. A lot of it just depends on what all is going on, but might want to start trim on the number of paths, perhaps. But you know, definitely going to be having a different look whenever we play Boros Burn in the league again. But thank everybody for tuning in. This has been John for MTG Nexus. Once again, if you want to see the deck tech in the first couple of matches, it'll be a link somewhere in this video for the first couple of matches and the deck tech in a separate video. But hope to see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.